it's all about turning AI on its head. It's not so much that it's artificial intelligence. It's really about how it helps us. Can it do things that help us? How do we use it? What role does it play?
Hey, my name is Felix Tia. I'm the host of the Culture of Code, where we invite experienced engineering leaders like engineering managers, software engineers, and product managers to come onto the show to share what they've learned about growing and succeeding in the tech industry. In today's episode, we have Laura Ferguson, founder of Wrap.Gifts, where she aims to revolutionize the way people communicate sentiment and maintain connections without physical gifts. With a career spanning several decades, Laura has held various roles, including Director of Software Engineering at General Assembly and Senior Software Engineering Manager at Google, amongst many other roles she held in the past. Welcome to the show, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you, Felix. So glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you on. So you mentioned to us that you got into software engineering at a pretty young age and had to overcome various challenges like not having access to resources that might be more prevalent today, but still might be other listeners out there that might be in the same situation as you. Tell us about what was it about your upbringing? How did you overcome these obstacles to get you to where you are today?
I think, just intensely curious. I mean, maybe it's common in my generation, but one of my first wishes was in sort of junior high was to have a calculator. And that sounds strange today because calculators are ever present, but having one that actually did math calculations and I took a little class to learn BASIC and things like that. I wouldn't say it was barely programming, but it was programming, and it was very exciting to me that I could make something happen on the computer. And I live near the Museum of Science and Industry. They had a whole section of the museum dedicated to mathematics and computer science. And I think that really just sparked curiosity for me.
Yeah, it sounds like your family was pretty supportive of this, or at least trying to put you in environments where you could explore this curiosity more.
They were. We just didn't have the resources to buy a computer for kids to play with. So later there was a computer in our house, but it wasn't for me. It was for the person who worked in my office in my room when I was at school. I probably knew what I could do with it. And later I did some programming on there for my parents' business. So yeah, they were really supportive. Later I took the first AP Pascal class that was offered. It was the pilot of that class. And I had to drive downtown to University of Illinois, and it was on Saturdays. And so I would sort of run in to take the class in the middle of Saturday morning, but I didn't have a computer to do my homework on. I did an Apple II, and I didn't have one. So I would go in and do the coding and also simultaneously learning how to type into a computer because we didn't know how to do that yet. And not just me, but most people didn't know at that time. And so use a word processor, those were new. And so I would type my homework in about an hour and a half. So I had to write it out by hand first. It was a little crazy.
Reflecting back on your upbringing and how your family was able to put you in these positions, even though you had limited resources, and now that you are a mom to, I think, two kids, what advice do you have for other parents that are maybe in this field already and they see that they're, or maybe not, but I'm assuming most listeners are already in this field, that they see their kids having this curiosity, this similar curiosity that you had. How do you recommend they pursue this? And I'm sure it changes depending on the age, but how do you recommend people introduce their children that might not have an experience really with programming or working with computers to get an introduction to it?
That's a really great question. I actually did some research on that in grad school as well. I think one of the things to keep in mind is Carol Dweck's growth mindset research, which is now pretty commonly known, but definitely look it up. She really talks about how we think about ourselves and how we think about what we can do. And this applies well beyond computer science. It applies to math. It applies to really any topic area. And it's a great approach for anyone who's facing challenges in work or in life to think of the current problem as not so much a reflection of yourself, but as a challenge to be overcome, as something that you can break down and figure out how you can learn that material. And that has certainly carried me through my career. I was programming, that first very small episode of programming was on tapes, which was crazy, right? Audio tapes. And then, later I was programming with Turbo Pascal or some early IDEs. And then much later in IntelliJ and learning how to use all those tools. And so I think that anytime you come to a new tool, I mean, I use VS Code now, like most people are doing. And, anytime you come to a new tool, you have to have a growth mindset. Anytime you come to a new programming language, it's that growth mindset that carries you through. I can learn this. I can figure out what's different about this. And another class in college that really shaped me on this is a programming languages course taught at Grinnell College by Mr. Stone, we called him Mr. John Stone, who is one of the faculty there. And he really emphasized how programming languages were both similar and different and gave us the full spec of that. I'm sure many people have taken courses like this, but that was one of the most empowering classes I had in college, where I came out of that feeling like I can learn any language, not just use the ones I had used before, but really adapt myself. And so I learned object-oriented coding after that, and then later I switched to web development. And I knew that it was gonna be hard, like each of those big changes was hard. But if you set your mind to it and it's what you wanna do, you can do that. And the same thing is true with learning AI and other topic areas. If it's what you wanna do, if the outcome from it is what you want, then figure out how to problem solve your own learning. And that's really a lot of what she's talking about.
Yeah, I think similar to your point earlier about how breaking things down, it's like kind of the core, I think helps see that a lot of times these are just abstractions and they're all kind of very similar. Where you learn one thing, it's not like starting from scratch again when you want to learn a new language. But in your career, have you seen anything that was like a big shift where you're like, wow, this is completely different than what I'm used to, or is like it really stretched yourself in terms of like you can't just rely on things you've learned in the past. Like it's almost like you're starting from scratch. Have there been any experience like that for you?
Absolutely. I think there were 2 points where this was very much true. So coming out of college, I did not know object-oriented coding because it was not predominant. I knew a little bit about it, but not enough to really code. I knew C, and I knew Pascal and Modula 2, which was precursor. And I went into some programming jobs, and we worked in Lisp, which was great and somewhat very functional. And then there was a project I wanted to work on in C++. I got onto the project. I was the lead, but I didn't really know C++. So I was like, okay, I have to get over this hump. I looked at all my references. This is pre-internet, so we use books. I really dug into it and realized I needed a mind shift change. And that was gonna be more than I could take on single-handedly. Now we have communities, we have Stack Overflow. You can really get the mind shift change just by reading what's out there on the internet. It's so much easier now. But at the time, I was very aware that that's what had to happen. So I'd actually took a class and just going through the work, the basic stuff, just like sometimes people go through tutorials or whatever, that really helps you shift your mindset in terms of how you think about a particular programming language. So I did that to learn C++. And then when I felt very comfortable with that, I took another class. I started studying Java, and I did Java programming for 13 years. But really the core of the way I thought about object-oriented programming was coming from that class. And then when I got to web development, I realized I had to do something similar. I didn't find the perfect class, but I did do a lot of work using the internet. And came to web development late because I was doing Java desktop applications. But when I got there, it's like, okay, I have to learn this. And I had done a lot of front end in Java, but that's not the same as web development front end. And I ended up deciding to be more of a generalist and moving more towards a lead role in general web development. So that added a whole bunch of new requirements and skills I had to learn. And really the whole way, and I read Carol Dweck way back in grad school. So the whole way I was really channeling this idea of, okay, it's not about who I am, it's about what I want to be, like how I'm going to get there. What do I have to learn? And so that really shaped me. So I think it stands the test of time that people are now talking about it. It's
Yeah,
really
it sounds like the philosophy or your approach is again breaking these things down and figure, okay, if I'm here, I want to get there. What are the obstacles in the way? What are the things I have to learn? What are the steps for yourself to actually start progressing towards that direction?
yeah.
You mentioned something earlier about how you spent some time working on desktop software, and in your role at CNN, you worked on rebuilding the election data system, which I think was a desktop software.
Yeah.
Right now, there's pretty much a lot of the roles out there that people are in or are applying for are cloud-based or SaaS businesses, not so much as like desktop software was back in the day, much more popular. What difference do you find between those kind of, I guess, jobs where you're working on desktop software versus like more kind of cloud or like SaaS products?
That's a great question. I mean, in some ways, with desktop software, I was talking actually with a friend who's a college student and studying computer science, and he was talking about MVC and how he wasn't quite sure where it fit in. And with desktop software, we actually had to intentionally make things model view controller type structures. And it was very helpful because then you had, separation of concerns. You could decide where the responsibilities lay. Sometimes I'd have a model for the front end or something like that in order to make it easier to build that front end. And it was also in Java very componentized and in C++. And when I did Common Lisp development, we used a very componentized approach. Getting back to your question, the piece here that's changed is that when you go to web development, some of that's actually somewhat forced. But if you don't have that sort of house cleaning attitude where you're going to refactor things so that they end up being clean, not just sample code where you build everything in one file, but you're actually separating the concerns. If you don't do that, you end up with a really messy environment that's hard to refactor later. And somebody else coming along is going to be like, what the what? I don't know what this is. And I don't know how this works. And I've spent a lot of my time going back and reading other people's code and saying, okay, let's figure out where should this calculation be? Why isn't this working on the screen? Well, it's not in the right place, right? It's not got the right timing. It's taking too long. It's holding other things up. All those things that no matter how good your framework is, if you put the code in the wrong place, it's just not going to work well, right? And the user's expectations are the consequence, right? That we fail their expectations when a calculation takes too long, when it's something that should be an asynchronous process doesn't tell the user, hey, I'm going to be stuck for a while. It happens all the time. We take it for granted, actually, that users will accept that spinning dial, and we're not communicating with them. We're not telling them why the system is gone, why it's taking so long. And you can have the fastest internet, but if the calculation on the back end is not working right, then users' expectations are not going to be met. Fortunately, our government systems many of them have improved a lot since the healthcare debacle, but you see it in many other cases. And I was on some like insurance websites or something the other day, and I was like, there it goes, ding, ding, ding. You're like, what are you doing? You should be telling me what's happening, but you're not, you know. At least there was a watch cursor. There are worse cases.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's definitely, you certainly see I wouldn't say they're legacy systems, but you certainly see the kind of legacy approaches towards building software. And, in some
Yeah.
cases, there's the modern approaches to really emphasize user experience versus not. So I certainly hear what you're saying. So speaking of learning, you spent some time as that director of software engineering at General Assembly. We'd love to know more about that role. I think what's right top of mind here is General Assembly. They offer courses and classes. They're also kind of known as like a boot camp for anyone that's like going through a multi-week, multi-month long
Mhm.
program. Maybe first talk about your role over at General Assembly, and we'd love to hear more about your thoughts right now about the boot camp space or people take courses like the ones that are offered at General Assembly to transition into new careers.
I think it's a huge, huge opportunity for folks who are looking at, is web development what I want to do? And even if you're coming from a computer science background, as my friend who's a college student, he's like, they're teaching all the wrong things. And it's really tricky because I fundamentally believe that computer science education is very helpful. But you get a lot of that from GA, and you also get a very focused approach on whichever topic area you're studying. I think that's true of sort of the whole bootcamp movement, really helps people focus on the skills they need for these particular types of jobs. Now, that going back to the point about growth mindset, I think that the most important thing to take to a program like GA is a growth mindset. What you're learning there is the beginning point, right? I could go back and teach you how to write BASIC on a tape. Will that teach you how to build a website or a data system for CNN or anything else? No, it won't directly teach you. But if your mindset is, yes, I can do this, I can figure this out, then GA is a great place to be because that is the starting point of following the journey. And certainly with the JavaScript environment, TypeScript environment we have now with node modules and whatnot, you have so many libraries to learn, so many different libraries to take advantage of. You blink and there's another library, that's for sure. But when you look at what tools should I use, which JavaScript syntax should I use? Should I use TypeScript? What's the latest philosophy? Being ready and willing to learn that And then when the change happens, because inevitably within 10 years, with actually really this year with generative AI, and someone says to you, you have to understand how this is, you're going to build it in, you're going to do whatever. And it's like, oh my God, I have to learn what training sets are. I have to learn all these different aspects of be ready. Be ready to learn. Use something like GA as an opportunity to learn and to build not only your portfolio, but your mental portfolio, like what you're able to absorb and expand your mindset. So I think any place that lets you get hands-on and gives you support is a great place to start, no matter what field you're in. I wanted to learn about being an entrepreneur. And so I went to startup weekends and I spent weekends learning about how to build small businesses or how to build SaaS businesses. It's about diving in and adding to your own mental portfolio of what you want to learn and being willing to like expand and always being willing to say, hey, I need to learn something new.
Yeah, I think there's something there about how by repeatedly showing yourself that you can learn new things, you build that evidence and build that confidence that you can learn new things, that you're always adaptable. And I think that's important part. That does a lot of the work, I think, for the growth mindset. I think just knowing that it's possible for you, I think does a lot. And so you're talking about how much this year things have changed, like you mentioned with the generative AI. And you've been involved with AI machine learning for many years. I think you mentioned from the 90s you were involved in this. Definitely you can speak to this. How have you seen the role of AI or machine learning evolve over the years? And what is it? We almost feel like we're kind of at an inflection point this year. So how do you see the next couple of years playing out in terms of how important or how much of an impact AI or machine learning is going to impact specifically people that are in the software engineering career path?
That's a really great question. First off, and this is another meme I saw, until clients know what they want and can tell us exactly what they want and are actually correct about what they want, it can be really hard to replace knowledge workers. That's what we are. We're knowledge workers. We go and we figure things out. And as long as we maintain that with a growth mindset, we're okay. Okay. Our jobs have changed. We no longer have to look in a book. We use different tools than we used many years ago. And every year it's growing and changing. Right now, there's things that help you do your coding better and help you search better. But understanding what the problem is, understanding what's best for humans, we're still the experts on that. And I think that's going to last. Now, I can turn to ChatGPT and ask it to write an apology note. And it writes a fantastic apology note. It writes a great essay. It can write code, whatever. Doesn't mean it's all true because, of course, there's the whole verification issue with that. Bard from Google, I think, is based on a little bit more solid ground because they do a lot of verification, a ton. Can't really talk about what happens at Google, but I can just tell you that's really where it's at. It's all about making sure that you're getting quality information. I built software that was actually using AI systems. Now, it wasn't generative AI in the 90s. It was AI systems that we used something what's called fuzzy AI. So we were building custom systems that we put knowledge into, and then it would come up with unique paths for a learner. So we were building teaching systems. And so we had a tutor who would talk to you and you ask you questions and then try to coach you. So you, as a human, could learn, right? So it's all about turning AI on its head. It's not so much that it's artificial intelligence. It's really about how it helps us. Can it do things that help us? How do we use it? What role does it play? And so when you look at something I was playing with, I think it was Photoshop, had a great little tool for inserting a birdie into your picture. I think that's very helpful, but it may not, as an artist, it may not be what I want. Or I might be a poet who just wants a picture to go with my art. And yeah, that might take something away from another artist. But more than likely, if I really want particular artist style, I'm going to go find that artist. And the same thing goes for coding. When we look at how can it help us? How does it assist us? We already have things that do code completion. And now we have some things that, oh, here's the code you're looking for. I just saw an ad for one of these. I'm like, that's awesome. Because how much time do you want to spend hunting down this piece of code? It used to be we had to sit there and watch things compile. Nowadays, boom, it's compiled. It's compiled before I even blink, if things are going well. And so when you look back at like how AI has evolved, the real question here is acceptance. It's the acceptance of the general world to the idea of AI. I took AI almost off my resume. I put it as a minor point for a long time, even though I worked with it and plenty of experience. But it was difficult to find the right roles where I could do what I wanted to do, which was building educational software. I'm not doing that these days, but that is what I wanted to do at the time. And those roles were like, well, AI is too much. And so the question is right now, for your business, for your project, whatever you're working on, is AI the right answer in the right place? And figuring that out is all about looking at what is it capable of, understanding the capabilities. Some of those have been there for a long time. It's not all machine learning. It's not all AI is much more than machine learning. It's more than generative AI. There's lots of other technologies that we have actually become part of our lives. Well, every time you go to Google, you're using AI. It's just not the one that's all, exciting right now. So we are surrounded by systems like this, but it's become very visible. And so that's the difference. So now when the boss says, hey, we should use some AI, it's like, okay, what problem do you want to solve with it? How are we going to get the data for that? Same things you would ask in any other situation. It's a tool that goes into our computer science work tool bench, and we apply it where it fits. And
Yeah. I like that approach of seeing it more as a tool rather than a complete replacement. Because as you say, it's very far away from actually being able to replace. There's still going to be a job for knowledge workers that make that kind of translation possible. So I want to talk a bit about your transition into entrepreneurship with Wrap.Gifts. So I guess what made you decide to make this leap, and how did you come about making that decision? It's a pretty big decision to make. So tell us more about that process.
so it sounds sudden, but it is something that I've been thinking about, the particular problem and also entrepreneurship for some time. So about 10 years, roughly. And I worked at a startup called Create.io, which is a real estate startup. I was the CTO at that startup. It was actually one of my dreams to be the CTO at a startup, and just happened across that project. I met my co-founders through LinkedIn. They found me really, and we had a really good run. And I really loved being in that role, the creativity of it, trying to figure out how everything worked. And then I had some other adventures. And I think of it that way. I don't think of it as, success or failure. I know, of course, there's big successes out there. But I again was thinking of it as, okay, let me see if I could make this business work and let me learn from it. And if it's not going to work, then I'll just move on. And that might be I get as far as writing some ideas down in a business plan, or working with some people and seeing what they're exploring. And so I took that path. Now I went off to work at various places the last few years to, make ends meet and all of that, which we all have to do sometimes. And then I came back and I had been playing with this idea when I was at school at UPenn. I took a program in social engineering design and then got certified as in game thinking, which is another form of design thinking that Amy Jo Kim has written about. She has some great courses on. And so game thinking is about how you actually build games, make them addictive and things like that, and really create engagement around enterprise products and anything else that you want to be people to be delighted by. And then the social innovation design, program was really a great look at how can we make a difference in this world. And so when I was there, I was thinking about what ideas have I had that I want to continue on. And so Wrap.Gifts is our goal is really to look at a problem, I probably most of us have had, maybe you've had, where I send a gift to someone and it's going to show up in an Amazon box and maybe it has some nice, you know, sparkly wrap inside and a little slip of paper that says happy birthday, from Laura, but it's kind of generic, and I used to like wrapping presents and giving gifts and stuff like that were physical. But nowadays, it just doesn't happen without a lot of effort, right? Ship it to yourself and so on. That doesn't make any sense. And really, what's the point? The point is we're sending them something useful or we're sending them something beautiful, but we're really trying to express a sentiment. We're trying to say what we feel. And when we're trying to express that sentiment, what we feel, we have this blocker that is all these little businesses that maybe they'll handle it for you, but that's a rarity. And so I'm looking at ways, how can we get the sentiment expressed and separate that a little bit from the actual gift, but also express it more, like make it more custom. And I did some research and it seemed to be people like that custom, like it's actually from me to you, or it's from me to, whoever. So that's the piece that we're looking at. And we're just trying to make it fun and engaging and delightful.
First of all, I appreciate you breaking all that down. I think you're certainly solving a real problem here. And I encourage everyone to check it out, Wrap.Gifts. I think it's very cool for anyone to just be able to see this transition where you've had a long career in the tech space. And a lot of people will say, like, oh, that's a comfortable career. Why take this leap into something else? And I think you have a really good point there about how nothing's ever kind of final. And you should never think of it as like, this is my only shot at this. And I think I love your approach of thinking of it as like, let's try this new adventure and see where it takes you. So I appreciate you sharing that perspective. And again, thank you so much for your time. Laura Ferguson, who does a lot of different things, has done a lot of different things, but is currently the founder of Wrap.Gifts. That's WRAP.GIFTS. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience and your advice with us, Laura.
Thank you, Felix.
And that's all the time we have for this episode. Come join us next time on the Culture of Code. Again, my name is Felix Tia. Take care.